Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi at-tahirin. We are having our third lesson of Ilm al-Akhlaq, and today we're going to talk about some of the different types of methods of akhlaq and different topics about akhlaq from a perspective of the sciences. So akhlaq, or morality, we can translate it as, is not something which was only found amongst Muslim thinkers. Akhlaq is not something that you only find amongst the Muslim scholars or even just the Shia scholars. Rather, akhlaq, or morality, the science of ethics, can even be found in philosophy. The philosophers, they used to divide intellectual sciences in accordance with akal. They said akal, the intellect, is divided into two categories. You have this intellect, and it has two aspects. One is akal al-nadhari, and the other is akal al-amali. So in akal al-nadhari, you had theoretical sciences, you have philosophy, you have mathematics, you have physics. In Aql al-Amali, you have practical sciences, like you have Akhlaq ethics, you have house management, you have politics. So according to that division of Aql al-Nadhari and Aql al-Amali, then we could say that the sciences, which are non-transmitted sciences, are divided into two broad categories. That is, they are either those which are nadhari or amali. They are either theoretical sciences or practical sciences. So they're either things that have to do with the mind somehow, or things that have to do with practical do's and don'ts. So over here in philosophy, they used to consider akhlaq, or ethics, as part of the philosophy, which was amali, which was practical philosophy. So ethics is something we can find also not only in philosophy, but we could also find ethics or morality in other world religions. You may find moral topics in Buddhism. You may find moral topics in Christianity. You may find moral topics in Judaism. Morality is something you can analyze in the various different world religions. Now, do we have critiques about certain certain methods or certain ideas? Yes, we could have critiques, and then there's some common ground that we could agree on. But you could find, if you have an overview of world religions, no matter if that's Far Eastern religions, or it's religions in the Middle East, or it's European religions, you'll find that there are topics related to morality. So as an example of finding these kind of moral topics, or sometimes finding something about moral traits, as an example, we have Judaism. Now it's attributed. I just did a Wikipedia search. I'm not an expert in this type of area, but I just did a little search, and I found that it is attributed to one of their old scholars, who was Bin Akiva, who lived around 50 of the Common Era, so almost 2,000 years ago. He stated, they attribute to him that he stated, whatever you hate to have done to you, do not do it to your neighbor. He said, whatever you hate to have done to you, do not do to your neighbor. Therefore, do not hurt him. Do not speak ill of him. Do not reveal his secrets to others. Let his honor and his property be precious to you as your own. This is a moral quality. This is a moral discussion. Treat people as you would have what you would want to have done to you. Don't do to others what you wouldn't have done to you. This is a moral teaching. So you could find in intellectual thinking and in religious thinking, you could find moral topics. You could find akhlaqi topics. Now, like I said, we could have some discussions and analyzations on what common points we could agree on, and if there's any differences that we could agree on, there's any differences that we wouldn't agree on. But that's beyond the point. The point is, morality is something that you see as an important topic. So morality is something that you see as that is seen as an important topic around the world, throughout history. So not only that, but we may find ethics or morality amongst Western and non-Western thinkers as well. Not only just the religious people, not only just the scholars of religions, not only just the philosophers, but we also find akhlaq or morality or ethics being a topic amongst Western and non-Western thinkers. Since there is a diversity in societies and religions and peoples in regards to those who are thinking upon this ethics, there are consequently various different methods amongst people. There's various different methods of ethics amongst people, which we may not agree with. We may not agree with these various different methods. So in this lesson, we shall introduce some of these types of ethical methods. And we could become, you could become familiar with the different types of ethics, some of it that are out there. So the first type of ethics is called consequentialism. Utilitarianism, consequentialism. So this ethical theory suggests that there is no good or bad. There's no moral good and no immoral bad. So this theory is suggesting there's no good or bad, as in moral goodness or immoral badness. Rather, what is considered here as moral or immoral, according to this theory, is the results of the actions, the consequences. So you can see why it's called consequentialism. So they're saying that there's no good, moral or immoral, good or bad, but what's good or bad is the action, the consequence. So this is where you have this famous saying in the West that the end justifies the means. The end justifies the means. This is in accordance with this kind of ethical theory. Therefore, they would say whatever leads to good results is a good end. It's a good thing. It's a moral thing. And whatever leads to bad results is an immoral thing, a bad thing. So with consequentialism, the focus is on the consequence, not whether something is good or bad. The focus is on the outcome. So no matter if you do wrong in the process, what matters is the outcome. And then over there, you could have topics like the greater good outweighing the lesser good, and things like this in this kind of theory that they would discuss. The second type that we have is called deontological ethics. This ethical theory suggests what is really morally good And what is actually really immoral is the action itself. Is the action itself, not the result of that action. So this theory suggests that it's the action itself, the very action which is good or bad, not the consequent of the action. Hence, lying is bad no matter if it was to protect one's life or others or not. So in this, so you can see, so the first one that we have is consequentialism. This ethical theory suggests that there is no good or bad, moral or immoral actions in themselves. Rather, what is considered here as moral or immoral is the results of the actions. So it's the consequence of those actions. That's where you have this famous saying, the end justifies the means. Therefore, they would say whatever leads to good results has a good ending and is a moral thing. And whatever leads to bad results is a bad ending or leads to a immoral thing. So the second one that we have is called deontological. This ethical theory is not looking at the consequence of the action. Rather, this ethical theory suggests that what is really morally good or what is really immoral is the action itself, not the consequence of the action, not the result of the action. Hence, lying is bad, no matter if it was to protect one's life or protect others' lives or not. So you can see us here as Shia, we have a problem with this because we have a belief in taqiyya. So here, in this idea, in this moral theory, what matters is the action itself. If lying is immoral, then its end results never justify the means. If telling the truth is moral, then the end results never justify will never justify the means. It won't matter what the consequences are if you tell the truth. What matters is you told the truth. That's what's being moral or not. So there's a famous story about the Moriscos who lived in Muslim Spain. They had were Jews and Muslims. They had coexistence together. So here you have the story of the Moriscos. When the Europeans, they came and they invaded and they took over and they forced them to convert to Christianity. They forced them to convert to Christianity. Some were exiled and some were forced to convert to Christianity. So here, some of them, what they did was they pretended to be Christians. They pretended to be Christians. And they practiced Islam in secret. So they did taqiyya. These moralists of the deontological view, they would have suggested that what they did was immoral. What they did was immoral according to the deontologicalists. Whereas us, the Shia school of thought, would consider this as a good action. Why? It's taqiyya. Taqiyya. If you couldn't get out any other way, and this is what you were forced to do, this is a good option. So deontologicalists look at the actual act itself, not the consequence of the act. As you would see, we don't fully agree there. The third type is called virtue ethics. Virtue ethics. This theory is said to have been first presented by Aristotle. And here what happens is that we judge the action, whether it is good or bad, moral or immoral, according to the virtue that it is indicating upon. Like if a person is being generous, okay, if it indicates that he has a generous moral quality, okay, this is a moral thing. If a person is being being miserly, if it indicates upon miserliness as a vice, then this is immoral. Imagine a person does an act of kindness. That act of kindness is resulting from a fixed quality, malaka, in their souls. Therefore, this theory focused not on the action itself, not on the consequence of the action, but on the moral quality which is inside the person's soul. So this theory focuses on the moral quality in the self, whether it's immoral or immoral. Virtue ethics. Therefore, we may say, according to this theory, that the way to know and understand if something is morally good or something is immorally bad is to know the virtue itself. By knowing a virtuous person, who has done this virtuous act, now you know that that is a virtuous and moral act. Or knowing that it is not done, that he's not done it. So this is a virtue ethics. Now, philosophical ethics or virtue ethics, this ethical theory suggests that we have a certain potentials in us, certain faculties in our souls that we can balance to produce virtue. If we balance them, or if we leave it to neglect or excess, they develop vice. So imagine it like a scale. You have neglect, negligence, it goes down. You have excess, it goes up. So imagine it as a scale. You have if it's in the middle, it's virtue. If it goes up in excess, it's a vice. If it goes down into negligence, it is a vice. So this theory suggests that we have some of these faculties in our soul for some important virtues, that if we don't have them balanced right, we will have vices. This is what is called as virtue ethics, which is mainly what we'll discuss in these courses. Now, not every ethics may be directly associated to balancing one of those faculties, but we'll talk about many different things in these classes, inshallah. So perhaps an Islamically acceptable akhlaq or ethics is actually really a mix of various types of ethics. Sometimes it may be deontological. Sometimes it can be consequential. And from an aspect, it is virtue ethics based. And I said an Islamically acceptable ethics. Amongst Islamic scholars, we have this topic of adalat, of justice. This topic of adalat is raised. If it is said the definition of adalat, of justice, is not sinning, and someone doesn't sin because he can't have access to sin, is that a virtue or not? Is this person having that malaka, that fixed virtue in the soul of not sinning, of being just because he has no access to it? And if he had access to it, he would commit the sin. The deontologicalists, they would say refraining from sin is a good act. So they'd say, yes, it's a moral act, because their focus was the act. The consequentialists, they would say it is good because the harms of sin did not happen. The consequence of the immoral consequence didn't happen. So this is a good act. It's a moral act. The act of not sinning according to virtue ethics in the above example didn't come from the virtue of piety. It didn't come from taqwa. It didn't come from taqwa of Allah, because the person just didn't have access to it. How do we know he has that virtue? So this person doesn't have the virtue of adalat, doesn't have the virtue of justice. So see the difference from how they could look at it and how they could view it? Just because a person doesn't have access to do a sin doesn't mean that they won't commit it. If they had access, they may do it. But having the fixed quality in the soul that prevents one from doing it, that is having a virtue. We can say then that an Islamically acceptable ethics can take on virtue ethics, but we may not accept every single part of virtue ethics. like a moral act, like the point of a moral act emanating from moral qualities. But the opposite of that is not always correct. That is, if an act is not combining with a with from a if an, so that is if a so the opposite of that is not always correct. Like if an act is not coming from a malaka, then that act can also be a virtuous act. As an example, someone helps the poor not because he has the virtue of generosity, but rather because he wants to get into paradise. He wants to get into paradise. He's looking out for his own self. So we have to analyze then different types of ethical theories and understand that some things are acceptable when we put them on the weight of thinking and the weight of Islam, and some things are not. And we could look into these different theories once we understand Islam very thoroughly, and then you could see that we don't fully agree with every theory and every single aspect of it. So an Islamically acceptable ethics is a kind of mix of different types of theories here. Now we have this hadith by Ali ibn Ibrahim, who has narrated from his father, from Ibn Mahbub, from Jamil, from Harun ibn Kharija, from Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, who had said the following. Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, he has said, there are three kinds of worship. There are three kinds of worship. There are people who worship Allah, the most majestic, the most holy, because of fear. This kind of worship is the worship of slaves. There are people who worship Allah, the most blessed, the most high, for his rewards. This is the worship of people for hire. The merchant. There are people who worship Allah, the most majestic, the most holy, for what? For his love. For his love. This is the worship of who? Ibadatu al-ahrar. The worship of the free people. The worship of the free. And this is the best kind, the most meritorious kind of ibadah. This is the most best kind of worship. So in this narration, we can see that people have different motives. People have different motives to worship Allah. And in Islam, we're not rejecting these motives. We're not saying a person cannot refrain or do their wajib because they fear Allah, they don't want to go to hell, and they're worshiping Allah out of fear of the master. We're not saying that somebody cannot worship Allah because they want to gain a reward, they hope to gain a reward, they want to get something in exchange. That's acceptable. These are all acceptable. But the best kind is to worship Allah for love of Allah, for Allah himself. That is the free person's worship. That is the free person's worship. That person is not this that person is free. And that is a real type of high level servitude to Allah the Exalted. So then we have quickly to tell you what meta-ethics is. You may see this term somewhere, meta-ethics. Meta means like after. After. That's what metaphysics means, after physics. But metaphysics technically doesn't mean something that is beyond physical things. Metaphysics topic is existence qua existence. So its topic is existence. But this is what literally meta means. Meta means after. So meta ethics means those above ethical theories kind of topics. So meta means after, hence why we call metaphysics as means after physics. Hence, it studies things related to existence, causality, etc. That's what you study in metaphysics, which studies existence. As for the branch of study called metaethics, what is it? This is the study of what is goodness. You want to know what is good? Goodness itself. What is that essence of goodness? What is the quiddity of goodness? This is a topic that you study in metaethics. Or what is justice? What exactly is justice? This is a study of metaethics. What is oppression? This is a study in metaethics. Hence, those notions which are employed and applied in the ethical sciences below it, in those ethical theories, are defined and studied in metaethics. So this was then now some of the ethical thoughts that are amongst the thinkers in the world. We have consequentialism, we had deontological theory, we had virtue ethics, and I said Islamic ethics, and I said Islamically acceptable type of ethics is one where you have a kind of combination of the positive and good points of these of different ethical theories. So I said an Islamically acceptable ethics is one where you have a kind of combination of different things. So we don't fully accept everything in all these different types of theories. And when we continue, we will continue with virtue ethics, inshallah. And we will continue next week. Wa akhiru dawana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.